Good evening, viewers. Welcome to another edition of Spotlight. Today's Spotlight is on Texas District 1. Texas District 1 is located on the eastern Texas, and it has about a population of little over 700,000. There are about 51.2% females and 48.8% male, 77.1% whites, and 18.4% blacks and 1.0% Asians. The unemployment rate is 8.1%. Median household income is just around 40,000. High school graduation rate is 82.8%, and then college graduates are about 20%. From this district, Mr. Hank Gilbert is a Democratic Party candidate, and then we invite now Hank Gilbert. Good evening, Mr. Gilbert. How are you?
I'm fine. It's great to be with you.
Okay. How is the campaign going on in your district, Mr. Gilbert?
Well, I think it's going really well. We've raised quite a bit of money and been able to effectively utilize it, I think, through digital, phone banking, texting. Our commercials are now up on TV. They've been up about a week. We've got a lot of people excited and interested, and voter turnout has been off the charts the first week of early voting. Which is usually a good sign for Democratic candidates. And I feel really good about it.
Okay, I have seen about your opponent, and then you really raised a lot of money when compared with your opponent. But he didn't spend so much either. He spent only some 90K out of whatever he raised as on today.
Yeah, he's traditionally raised quite a bit of money throughout the years, even though he didn't have an opponent or had an opponent in name only, but not this year. He hadn't raised hardly any money.
Yes, I have seen that in Open Secrets. Okay. What are the general problems that your district faces, Mr. Gilbert?
Well,
how your opponent is failing on those things?
Well, we have the same problems basically that a majority of the country does, in that Texas is the most uninsured state in the country. This particular district that I'm running in is second in the state as far as the percentage of people who lack health insurance. Because of that, we've had 4 of our rural hospitals close during this administration due to the fact that they just they couldn't keep them open. The people just didn't have money, have insurance, and they had to treat them, and they just couldn't stay open. My opponent is yet to try to help our local hospital districts in securing any type of funding or anything to keep the doors open. He's on record voting over 60 times against the ACA. And is fully supportive of the state of Texas and the Trump administration in their current lawsuit, which is going to be heard in the Supreme Court a week after the election day to determine whether or not the ACA gets to stay in existence. We also have infrastructure problems. 30% of the residents in my district have no access to the internet. And a large part of that 30% have no access to 5G cell service. If the coronavirus hadn't taught us anything, it's taught us how important access to the internet is, if for no other reason, in trying to educate our kids with school closures. So, he consistently votes against those very type of projects that would bring dollars into this district to take care of our broadband issue. He spent the majority of his 16 years in Congress being a follower of the Republican Party and Republican administrations rather than working for the constituents in his district.
I have been speaking to a lot of candidates like you, and most of them, they were running against the incumbents who have been there for 20 years, 30 years, and so on and so forth. Do you, by any chance, propose or support the term limits on the Congress?
Sure, I do. Not just Congress. I mean, I've already got the legislation written to introduce when I get elected
Mhm.
to put term limits on members of Congress. I don't
Mhm.
believe that any member of Congress or the Senate should be able to serve any more than a president can. You know, we have term limits on a president of two 4-year terms, so that's a total of 8 years. I believe members of Congress and the Senate shouldn't be able to serve over 8 years.
Mhm.
And after that period of time, they leave. But I'll even take it one step farther than that. I
Mhm.
don't believe in lifetime judicial appointments. I think
Mhm.
they should also be relegated to term limits.
Yeah, that also I feel like, see, the main problem that is coming is it's being a lifetime appointment. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been a problem at all.
Well, it's just like you look at politicians.
Mhm.
Look at those that, if you can remember back 16 years or 20 years or 30 years, when some of these politicians were first elected and they ran, you know, on whatever issues they ran on, and then look back and see how many of them got those issues taken care of. And what seems to happen is the longer someone stays in a position, the more calcified they become in their thought process, and basically over a period of time just lose touch with their constituents. And I think what a lot of people don't understand, a lot of these politicos don't understand, is that their sole purpose for being in Washington is to represent their constituents, the ones that voted to put them in office and the ones that voted against them. They're
Mhm.
not there to represent the constituents of another state or another country. They're there to represent the constituents of their district. And hopefully, those issues will resonate, just like I said earlier, across the country. Um, but so many of them get so wrapped up in themselves and their own egos and their own ambitions that after a period of time they lose touch with number one, who they're there to represent and what they're there to represent.
Next question is on the economy. Well, you want to repeal whatever the tax cuts that were proposed by Trump administration, and then you say the tax cut should be more to the middle class and the lower middle class, and you propose to impose taxes on corporates as well as wealthy people. My question to you is, wealthy people may be fine, but if you impose again the taxes on the corporates, don't you think that their ability to create new jobs will go down?
Well, here's the thing. Number one, the wealthy in our country, which is a small sliver of our society, probably
Mhm.
1% or less, have done better year after year after year for the last 20 or 30 years, to a point to where that money is going out of the country in investment, or it's going to other places rather than being regenerated in our economy.
Mhm.
If you look at the history of our country was not only built on middle class individuals, it has always been, the middle class has always been the main economic driver of our country. And what we have seen, and it has been manifested in this administration, is a slow and steady decline of our middle class. You know, I grew up in a not a I grew up in a middle class household, and I'll say that by this: both of my parents worked. Uh, my mother stopped working, probably in her 50s. My dad worked up until his 60s.
Mhm.
And the most either one of them ever made in their lifetime was $9.50 an hour. But we always had what we needed to survive. And so I always considered us to be, middle class individuals. My family, it's been the same way. We've had enough to provide for our kids and provide for ourselves, but, no big nest egg hidden away anywhere or in a foreign bank somewhere.
Mhm.
Uh, but what this tax cut did that was passed after Trump became elected was an ambition of people like Paul Ryan and others had for decades. And what we saw, while the average American might have seen a little bit more money in their paycheck after those tax cuts came about, what most of them realized was at the end of the year, they paid more in income tax. So it was basically a net zero or maybe even a negative. Whereas the upper portion of our society received huge windfalls. I mean, even the economists say that 80 to 85% of that tax bill went to the top 1% in our country. Whereas we see now on a daily basis, particularly with COVID, how much the middle and lower class of our country, which is the vast majority of the people in this country, are struggling to pay their mortgages, to pay their bills, to put food on the table. Yet this administration has offered no relief and consistently fights relief for those individuals. I believe that Joe Biden will work hard to not only do away with the Trump tax plan, which I would vote to do away with, but would work on a tax plan that would benefit middle and lower income families. Because that's what, and here's the advantage of that. Now, some people will say, well, you know, that's a giveaway to that segment of people. Well, no, the Trump, it's no more of a giveaway than the Trump, Ryan, Gomer, whoever's name you want to put on it, tax plan was. The difference is when you give people in the middle class and the lower middle class a tax break, they're going to spend every dollar of that money, whereas the rich will not. And when they spend that money will regenerate itself in our economy 7 to 10 times. So not only is it a boost to the majority of the people that need it, it is a boost to our overall economy because it actually gets respent rather than shipped off to a foreign bank somewhere to draw interest.
Understandable. You heard that Trump's tax payment of $750 only.
Yeah.
And then in the debate, he told, he was paying millions of dollars. And then the $750 is just because he got the tax credits, which were formulated by you, the Democrats. That's what he told. When you get elected, do you propose to repeal the tax credits for various projects?
Well, number one, I think we need a complete overhaul of our tax system. You know, the only difference between myself and Donald Trump when it comes to taxes, I either have to do my own or I pay one accountant that I've used for years to do my taxes. Whereas people like Donald Trump, they may have 50 accountants, or some people have more than that. I mean, I know people that own large businesses that a whole floor of their building is nothing but tax accountants because they find every little loophole that they can in the tax law to write off things. And that's what apparently Donald Trump has done, if not even criminal acts, in order to get his tax liability so low. But I cannot for the life of me, and this is what doesn't make sense to everyday Americans. You know, I've been paying income tax since I was 18 years old. And I'm self-employed. I have a small business. On a good year, a really good year between my business and my cattle operation and everything else, you know, I might net $100,000 on a really good year, but I'm going to pay income tax. And since I'm 60 years old, I've filed taxes since I was 18, and only 2 times in my life did I get a refund, and neither time was that refund over $200. But I consistently pay several $1,000s a year in income tax, even though I don't make any more than the average American does. And what befuddles me and befuddles individuals just like me is how can someone who proclaims to be a billionaire, whether he is or not, pay less in taxes than someone who's working an 8 to 5 job 5 days a week and trying to run a household. That alone tells you that people are on the upper end are either being dishonest about their assets in what they're filing tax on, but more importantly says that our tax system needs a tremendous overhaul. As far as corporate tax, you can put whatever number you want to on paper that corporations have to pay tax. But just like I said earlier, they have enough accountants to get by paying nothing. You look at General Electric, you look at any number of huge corporations in this country who do billions of dollars in business and have millions of dollars in revenue, yet they pay $0 in tax.
So basically, you propose a tax code revamping.
I think that we have to redo the system so that everyone pays their fair share of taxes.
About while commenting on the infrastructure and then federal spending, in your websites makes a comment. It is not how much you spend, but what you spend. So, do you think that this government is spending irresponsibly the money? My second question is. Democrats are more known for welfare schemes than the developmental schemes. So don't you think that your statement contradicts with the democratic principle that most money should go to welfare schemes?
Well, I think if the Republicans have pushed the message for decades now that they're the true fiscal conservatives in this country. But history doesn't bear that out. When you go back through the last half a dozen, at least, presidential terms, what you see under Republican leadership, you see an increase in the deficit and an increase in the debt. And what you see under Democratic presidents and Democratic administrations is deficit and debt reduction. So they're not practicing what they preach, but they preach it loud enough and hard enough and long enough that a lot of people believe it. I'm a fiscal conservative Democrat. That's what everyone in the South was prior to the signing of the Voting Rights Act and President Reagan making his push through the South and convincing a lot of people that because they were fiscal conservatives and that they were white, that they should be Republicans. And we saw a change. But I believe in paying for things. I don't believe in imposing something you can't pay for. Okay. So we need to get our financial house in order. Now, COVID has really knocked a hole in that because of so many people suffering. But that was a self-inflicted wound too by this administration because they blew it off as something that wasn't going to be important rather than trying to prepare the country for it. And my opponent, of course, is taking that up to a whole new level, saying he'd never wear a mask until he got COVID. Then he got it and blamed it on the mask. So that's just how, that's the type of candidate I'm dealing with. But when it comes to infrastructure projects, when it comes to things like that are going to fundamentally change.
Is that your opponent or Trump?
Well, no, it was my opponent. He came out and said that he would not wear a mask until he caught COVID. And then he caught it, and his explanation for getting it once he was interviewed was it had to be because of the mask. He had to have gotten it from the mask. But, that's the idiocy that I'm dealing with in my race. And unfortunately, we've had to deal with for 16 years in the Congress. But, one thing that Democrats and Republicans used to always agree on were infrastructure projects. Because anytime you can facilitate not only the movement of goods or people's communication or anything like that is going to help move this country forward, both parties always agreed on it. However, in the last, going on 12 years now, the Republicans have voted against every infrastructure project to come down the pipe. And my opponent does. Every time one comes to the floor, he's a no vote, regardless what it's about. If it's infrastructure, he's a no vote. And I just got through telling you 30% of the people here have no access to the internet. I think that is problematic because internet now is as vital of an infrastructure project as electricity was back in the day. And one proposal that I'm going to make when I get elected is that infrastructure should be, or internet should become a public utility. It should not be privately owned. It should become a public utility supported by the government, implemented in the country by the government, and then overseen by whatever companies, only regulated just like we do electricity. So that way it's sure to get all across the country. But it's just common sense things like that that we need to do, that people like my opponent care nothing about. They're more about supporting party positions rather than actually helping people. And I'm just the opposite. People are always going to come first, and instead of party, because we need to build this country. How in the world do we ever expect, as an ex-educator, I'm going to say this from an educational point of view, how can we ever expect to become the leader in the world of technology and education and innovation if we have the same old people with the same old ideas promoting the same type of policies and procedures? That's why I'm in favor of term limits. That's why I'm in favor of getting new ideas and new faces, a constantly revolving door of that inside of Washington to move this country forward. And that's why I'm running against this deadhead that I'm running against, because he's been there 16 years and not done anything to move this country forward.
What is your opinion on the trade deals that Trump is making? Left, right, center are, of course, failing in some things, like with China. So comment on the trade deals.
Well, number one, I don't think he's ever solidified a deal with China. He keeps,
of course, he didn't. Yeah.
He keeps saying it's a work in progress, and then he imposed all these tariffs on China, which wrecked our agricultural economy in this country and wrecked a lot of different things. As an agriculturalist, I think that was probably the worst thing he could have ever done. But you know what really amazed me, of all these things he placed tariffs on coming into this country, none of them were products that were being made in China for him or for his family. All of those were allowed to come through tariff-free, just like always. We've always had a trade imbalance with China, primarily because their tariffs on our goods are about 10 times what our tariffs are on their goods. And that's something that we need to stop. But, I haven't seen any tremendous trade deals for a person who said, he was the perfect person about making deals. I haven't seen anything that's changed dramatically. On the NAFTA agreement, about the only thing that changed in NAFTA was the name. Practically everything else is a mirror image of what NAFTA was. And there's some hard things that needed to be done with NAFTA. We have countries like China that have abused NAFTA ever since its inception. And if you don't believe that, then look up the only big deep water port that Mexico has on its western coast and see who owns that port now, and see when they purchased that port. China owns it, and they purchased it just before NAFTA was passed, so they could ship goods into Mexico across the country and come across our southern border tariff-free as if they were made or manufactured in Mexico. But they're not. They're coming from China. And other countries exploit that same thing. And Trump did nothing in this agreement to stop that.
But the other day he was telling that, because of MCA agreement in Wisconsin, I think there was a rally. He says, oh, you guys were selling your milk at 235% tariff in Canada, and now it's no more. Is that true? Being an agriculturalist, can you please comment on MCA agriculture and then your proximity to Mexico?
Well, just like most things, I think it's up to about 21,000 times now. Most things that he says are lies. And that's what's happened now. There's a lot of imbalances in agriculture, but there's never been a trade deal made, not only by this administration or any previous administration, that didn't have agricultural goods as a key component to that trade agreement. And we've allowed corporate agriculture to rule the roost in our country. We're seeing family farms go out of business every day. We have probably at this point in time right now, due to the China tariffs, we have the highest rate of suicide among farmers in this country that we've ever had. Nothing near what they have in India or other countries, but it's never been as high as it is now because these farmers cannot make it and they can't pay the notes that they have and traditionally have carried through their processes and just don't see a way out. And unfortunately, a lot of them are taking their lives. For those that aren't, a lot of them are losing their farms to countries like China. You know, years and years ago, when the Republicans were so dead set on busting up the unions in this country, and they started on the East Coast in the textile industry. And because of that, our textile industry went away. Practically all of our milled fabric now is being done either in China or Taiwan or Thailand. And China has now figured out, you know, we can make more money off of this if we can grow our own cotton. So they're buying up cotton farms all over this country that are distressed that the owners can't keep. They're also buying up our protein processing. Smithfield Foods, the largest pork processor in the country, is wholly owned by China. It's an American company wholly owned by China. We see the same thing from the largest protein processor in the country of cattle and chickens, JBS, wholly owned by two brothers in Brazil who are under indictment in the US. Yet when Trump passed out this $31 billion in bailouts to the ag industry because of his misplaced China tariffs, those two brothers received almost $1 billion of that money.
Wow.
JBS. Wow. And I don't know what the figure was for Smithfield, but I know Smithfield got a lot of money out of that deal as well. You know, and this is something that I will fight hard to stop.
Why when the farmers are committing suicides, like why it was not reported?
You hear it reported, but it's not with all the chaos and confusion that has been the everyday thing in this administration, from the lies being told to COVID's going to go away to I didn't do anything illegal over the impeachment, all that kind of stuff has drowned out the everyday news. But there are some places that are talking about it. And throughout the Midwest, you know, we've had a number of farmer suicides because of what has taken place as a result of these China's tariffs. You know,
go ahead. Go ahead. Okay. You said that a lot of jobs are moving away from Texas and then for that matter from USA still, and that to manufacturing jobs. And then you want to make legislations or vote for keeping the jobs away or in fact bringing the job from elsewhere to America. Can you explain what will be your plans, Mr. Gilbert?
Well, you have to do it in a pragmatic way. You know, this president has said over and over again about all these manufacturers that have come back to the U.S. and all these jobs, yet you can't find them because they don't exist. You know, I've sat here and watched over the term of the 16 years that Louis Gohmert's been in Congress, I've watched manufacturers leave. They just up and gone. And one of the main reasons, two of the main reasons for that. Number one, because our rural hospitals have closed, but the main driver is because we don't have internet access in a lot of these areas. And the way industry is now, you know, nobody hardly ever uses a phone anymore. These employers reach out to their employees via internet or texting or whatever. And when employers can't get in touch with employees due to lack of infrastructure, and they can't market their product as efficiently due to lack of infrastructure, they move to areas where they have those capabilities. And it's cost us a tremendous amount in East Texas and other parts of the country because they lack the same things. You know, I've talked to business owners who would love to bring manufacturing back to East Texas, but not until those issues are corrected. But we've seen through tax basically through our tax system. Companies leave America completely and go to other countries where they can pay whatever they want to for labor. They can get their products imported for lower tariffs and consequently make a lot more money on their product, but yet they're depriving their native country of where their business originated from of being able to reap any of those benefits. So what I would push for is a little bit of tax incentive to get those people back, but I would not be willing to give up the farm basically to get them back. You know, my plan on this or idea on this is if an American company wants to move its operations overseas or to any other country, that's fine. But we're gonna put so much tariff on their product to come back into this country, it would be far cheaper for them to stay here than to have to pay the tariffs on their products that they're going to try to sell us. You know, I'm also a very big union supporter. And I think that, you know, the American people not only should have the right to be a union worker or a job to be a union job, they should also demand it, because without unions, we've seen what has happened. We have a stagnant minimum wage, and a lot of these employers don't want to pay anything above that because they don't have to. And the term minimum wage is it's just a nasty term, because we don't need to be looking at the least we can pay people. We need to be looking at what it costs people to live and pay them a living wage. And unions will do that, and it will guarantee job security. Nobody, if you're not a union worker and you're employed in this country, your job is about as secure from 1 minute to the next. You have no job security, because somebody can come along and want that job and be willing to take less money to do that job, and you'll be out of one. And unions protect you from that. So you look back in history at the times when our country was the most stable, economics was stable, employment was stable, the middle class was stable. It was when the majority of our manufacturing and processing jobs were union jobs.
Affordable Care Act, you have mentioned about that while we were speaking about term limits, and then how it's going to be impacted by new Supreme Court justice. Your views on the replaceable act, medical act, what Trump is proposing versus the existing Affordable Care Act. Your opinions, and then why should you want to keep it?
Well, number one, we don't know what Trump's proposing, because he's been saying ever since he's been elected, in 2 weeks, I'm going to roll out a healthcare plan. We have yet to see a healthcare plan from the Trump administration. All we have heard and actually see is them killing or attempting to kill through the Supreme Court the Affordable Care Act. They've stripped just about everything good out of it already. You know, my wife and I, when we first got married, we didn't have health insurance because we couldn't afford it, because both of us had pre-existing conditions. When we decided to start a family, we knew we were going to have health insurance. Well, since we had pre-existing conditions in Texas, there wasn't an insurance carrier one in the state of Texas that would offer insurance to anyone with pre-existing conditions. So you had to go through the state pool, which is what we did. And our insurance cost us $3,000 a month.
$3,000? No.
$3,000 a month through the Texas pool for anybody who couldn't get insurance through a regular carrier.
That is ridiculously high.
$3,000, that equated to about 40% of our annual income we were paying out for health insurance. We did that till our kids were about 3 years old, and then we dropped it. And we went from then until the ACA was passed with no health insurance. And we just paid what we could out of pocket for anything that we incurred. And thank God we didn't have anything major happen. But when the ACA came out, we were able to afford health insurance again. And we kept it up until the time my wife passed away and both of my sons got married. So it was just me. And by then they had stripped out, the Republicans had stripped out most of the good parts of the ACA, and naturally the premiums had risen because of that. And when I got a quote for what it would be just for me, I told them, thank you, I think I'll pass, and just have been paying out of pocket. But here's what people don't understand about the ACA. We have roughly 25 to 30 million Americans who are on that plan. And it is by far cheaper than any individual plan that you could buy from an individual carrier. But when they push this Supreme Court justice through, who is already on record saying she's opposed to the ACA, and it's going to come before the Supreme Court exactly 7 days after Election Day. And the prediction is that the Supreme Court is going to strike down the ACA. So by year's end, those people who are on it will be off of it. And what's going to happen is we're going to go right back to where we were prior to the ACA, where the majority of the reason of people filing bankruptcy in this country was due to medical issues, medical bills, medical costs. And we're going to be right back in that hole again. And what else is going to happen, and this is why I think everyone should be concerned about what happens with the ACA, whether you're on it or not. When it goes away, all the major insurance carriers are going to get together and they're going to say, hey, the least common denominator is now gone. The cheap insurance is gone. And what's going to happen after the first of the year? I don't care what kind of plan you're on, if it's a retiree plan through your work, an employer plan, or a personal plan, you're going to see your copays go up. You're going to see your deductibles go up. You're going to see your premiums go up, and you're going to see your coverage go down. Now you can write that down that I said that today, and watch and see what happens after the ACA is gone, because I'm telling you I'm right. And it's this ACA before the Supreme Court is going to affect every person in this country.
Okay. So you strongly believe that it shouldn't be repealed at all?
I believe the ACA has problems. Just like when Social Security and Medicare was first introduced, it took 10 to 12 years before they finally got all the kinks worked out and got the majority of the people behind it. ACA has some issues that need to be changed. Number one, they need to kick the damn insurance companies out of the process and quit letting them be the tail that wags the dog. But I think it needs to be refined. And when it is, over time, it'll be the preferred insurance of the majority of the people in this country. And that's why the Republicans are so dead set against it, because they receive millions and millions of dollars a year in campaign contributions from the insurance companies, from the insurance lobbies. And the insurance companies are scared to death of the ACA.
I have read over your plans about immigration and then path to citizenship for these people who are not having any proper documentation. But you remember in the first year when Trump got elected, he offered in exchange of removal of that lottery system as well as chain migration, he wanted to offer a path to citizenship for all those undocumented illegal immigrants and their children. So what is your stand on the total immigration? Are you for the merit-based immigration system, or what do you want to do with the existing people who have been living and working here for a while without proper document?
Well, number one, I'll refresh your memory just a little. The day that Trump announced he was going to run for president, he basically said anybody of color that's an immigrant is a racist or a murderer or a criminal. But then there are a few good people. Okay. And since that day, he has not done one single solitary thing to legalize any immigrant, period, from any country, period. Where would our country be without immigrants? We would be in the dark ages, because our country is a country of immigrants.
Mhm.
You know, why is it that the vast majority of people around the world want to come to the US to get their education? Because they know we have some of the best educational institutions of higher learning in the world. Yet, where we goof up, where we screw up, is we let those people come here on education visas. And then as soon as they get their education and their visa expires, we tell them to get the hell out and go home.
Mhm.
When what we should be doing is saying, you have a home here if you want to stay, because we need your brilliance and we need your ideas. But instead, we let them leave and they go back to their country. And now all of a sudden, their country's kicking our butt in technology and innovation because we didn't allow them to stay here. Now, I'm talking about strictly an educational thing there.
Mhm.
Now, I'm going to talk about a worker and a humanitarian deal.
Mhm.
Agricultural industry as we know it in the United States would not exist if it wasn't for immigrants, period. End of story. I saw it firsthand, and every American saw it firsthand more than once during the Bush administration when we had ICE raids in California and when we had ICE raids in Florida. And we saw that year the majority of our citrus crops, our strawberry crops, our apple crops, our lettuce crops, and so many other vegetables and fruits fall to the ground and rot because of the deportation of these working immigrants in the agricultural industry. We continually see whenever a Republican in power wants to make a statement, we'll see a raid on a processing plant, like we saw last year with President Trump of the chicken processing plants in Mississippi. We saw it during the Bush administration in the meat packing industry throughout the Midwest. And go back to that thing, well, everybody's got to be documented. Yet the only people that paid a price in those instances, number one, were those workers who were just trying to make a living at something that Americans refused to do. And number two, the consumers, because they saw the price of those goods increase because of those plant shutdowns. But we never saw fines or any kind of penalties implemented to the owners of those institutions because they're donors to those Republicans. So what we need in this country is a comprehensive immigration plan, which we do not have, which the Republicans refuse to work on because immigration is such a divisive political issue. And they would rather that issue to go unsolved where they can use it to rile up their base in an election year rather than to solve it and help move this country forward. We have people that have lived in this country almost their entire lives who came into this country as immigrants and either overstayed a visa or they came in illegally. Yet since they've been here, they've committed no crimes. They've paid taxes. They've done all those sorts of things. But if you left it up to people like Donald Trump or like my opponent, they would be on the first bus back to the border. No, those people have every right in the world to be citizens. Ronald Reagan understood this when he was president, and he granted amnesty to millions of people. And they weren't all Latinos. They were from countries all over this world. Because a good friend of mine who supported my campaign in 2006 for Ag Commissioner, who was a Republican, came from South Africa into this country and made his business agriculture and became one of the largest producers in this country for pistachios and apples and so many other things. But he was legalized under Reagan's amnesty plan and was a model citizen until the day he passed away. So why would we turn away people that can add not only to the moral fabric of our country, but add to our economy and add and make this country a more diverse, better place? What's wrong with diversity? Unless you are a white supremacist, you should welcome diversity. And if you are a white supremacist, you need to go to find an island somewhere where all of you can move to and you can all be white together. But the Dark Ages are over. The Civil War was fought and it's over. If we're ever going to keep up with the world, we have to accept policies that the world deems acceptable. And that means that, just like the Constitution says, the Quran says, the King James Version of the Bible says, we're all equal.
Thank you. About the healthcare, and you said a lot of hospitals in rural America is being closed, and then you propose some plan. Actually, this is a surprising news for me. We being recent immigrant, we obviously migrate to cities. We wouldn't know much about the rural America. Can you throw light on us about this fact, which is actually disturbing for me in this developed country?
Well, you know, just like you said, the majority want to live in the cities. Well, you know, if you grew up in rural America like myself and like millions of other people in this country, you live there because you choose to. You don't want to live in a city where people are stacked on top of one another and it's just constant chaos, you know, all the time compared to what you're used to. But you know, living in a rural area, you shouldn't be penalized for that. And so many things work against us rather than for us. And one is medical. You know, I can remember a time when I was growing up where every little town had a hospital or a clinic. And, you know, insurance wasn't that big of a deal. It was affordable and everybody got to use it. And for the people that didn't, you know, I can remember a time in my life when I was a little kid where sometimes when we'd go to the doctor, my mama would take a couple of dozen eggs. And that doctor would treat us, give us a little, you know, a shot or a checkup or whatever, and our payment was 2 dozen eggs. And you know, that sounds kind of far-fetched to somebody that lives in a city, but in the country we call that bartering, and it used to be a way of life, particularly after the Depression. But now, due to the fact that the majority of our medical institution is funded through insurance, and so many people just can't afford insurance. These rural hospitals are having to close because, you know, the law requires them to treat anybody that walks in the door, whether they have the ability to pay or not. Right. And so they have to treat them. And if they can't pay, then they can't keep the doors open. And what we've seen over the last few decades is a more and more of a migration away from the rural hospital because they can't stay open. Yet politicians not trying to figure out how to keep them open and how to make that happen. And it's a travesty. And you know, I will constantly work to ensure that rural communities have availability to healthcare, because in some instances, you know, what scares me to death is right now in my district, with the rural hospitals that we've had closed, if you go down into the farthest southeastern part of my district and someone has a heart attack, by helicopter, they're 45 minutes to an hour away from the nearest hospital.
Oh my God.
So how do you expect them to survive?
No.
And, hey, and in other parts of this state and this country, it's worse than that. So it's an issue that needs to be solved, and an issue that should be a priority for every member of Congress, and unfortunately it's not.
How you propose this can be solved? Because this is much bigger problem than, I realize it's a very, very big problem than what it is thought to be.
Well, one thing, I mean, you know, if you've ever taken the time, and most people haven't and they never would, take the time to look at the federal budget and how we expend money and what we expend it on. There's a lot of frivolous spending within our government. And I think we need to change our priorities on how we spend our tax dollars that are going to work out and benefit more Americans. You know, I'm a strong supporter of our military, yet if you listen to the experts and you have any bit of common sense at all, I think we're moving farther and farther and farther away from shooting wars. Not only, you know, from America's standpoint, but from the world standpoint. And I think a lot of our confrontations that we will face in the future are going to be cyber wars. So I can't understand why we keep spending tens of billions of dollars a year on airplanes for our military that even our generals say they don't want and they don't need. And why we keep spending billions and billions of dollars on antiquated military equipment that we'll probably never use and the generals say we don't need. That's money that could be redirected into communities, particularly rural communities or communities which lack access, for medical funds, for all different types of things that would benefit people currently in the country, rather than something futuristically that we may never need.
Thank you. About the agriculture, I think there are not many Congress members who are farmers, or not many contenders like you who are farmers. I definitely wish you a success, but I would like to know what are the problems that farmers in your district are facing, and then in general in the country the farmers are facing, and how you propose to solve their issues, Mr. Gilbert.
Well, the biggest thing that's always affected farmers or ranchers in this country is the cost of production as opposed to the value of the product. We've never seen, well, we have seen, but it's been a long time ago that we've seen such a disparity in that across the board. Well, I don't care if you're talking about planted crops like corn and soybeans, or whether you're talking about cattle or hogs. We have let control of our commodity agriculture in this country be controlled by processes out of the hands of the people. And when I say that, I mean this. For instance, I talked about JBS and I talked about Smithfield earlier. In the beef cattle industry, you have 3 or 4 big processors that now control every aspect of the market. I mean, they have gotten so large and so big that they dictate what they're going to pay for live cattle. And then they set the box price or the retail price on those cattle. Throughout my lifetime, that spread has never been over $400 to $500 a head. Today, it's over $3,000 a head. And we're seeing producers lose $200 to $300 a head on cattle coming out of the feedlot. And that same animal, once it goes through the processing of one of these big processors, is making that processor $3,000 a head. So, and it's the same way in the commodities market. And the reason that you're seeing so many of these corn farmers and soybean farmers and cotton farmers just having to walk away or sell their operation that's been in their family for 150 years is because those same corporate influencers control the price of what their product is worth, rather than the farmer being able to set any type of price controls. And the corporations are backed by the government where the farmer's not. So we have a huge inequity happening right now in agriculture. And what's so bad about that is agriculture is the number 2 or 3 industry in our country that's responsible for our GDP. You take agriculture out of our GDP and we become a third world country. That's how important it is, not only to the health and welfare of our population, but to the economic welfare of our country. You know, for every one farmer in this country, we produce enough food to feed well over 200 families in this country. And we have the safest food anywhere in the world, yet we can't afford to produce it. And that's got to be straightened out. And hopefully, if I'm elected, Speaker Pelosi is going to put me on the House Ag Committee, and I can help get some of that changed.
Yeah, good luck with that one, sir. About the gun violence, I know for Texans it's a very delicate issue. How you are going to solve this problem?
Well, I'm a gun owner, and I'm unapologetically a gun owner. Of course, if you're a rural person and you grew up on a ranch, you're naturally going to have guns. But here's the thing. We've got to use common sense when it comes to guns. You know, prior to these assault type weapons being made to be bought domestically, we didn't have the gun violence issues that we had. Yeah, there'd always be shooting on the street because somebody got pissed off at somebody else or caught them with their wife or whatever. There were always those type of incidences, but nothing like we've seen since the AK-47s and AR-15 type assault rifles were available to sell to the general public. And so I've got two pieces of legislation ready to introduce. One is to stop the domestic production and sale of assault type weapons and high capacity magazines. Quit selling them, quit making them available for domestic sale. Now, it doesn't say a thing about taking them away from people that own them. You know, that's a fear tactic that Republicans love to use, just like, you know, any number of other issues, because they know it riles people up. Yet it's what I have to remind people of is look back in our history of all the years that the Democrats controlled the White House, the Senate, and the Congress. Not one time in any of those instances was a bill ever introduced, much less voted on, that called for taking guns away from people. So it's a scare tactic. But number one, the first part of my bill says no domestic manufacturer or sale. The second part of my bill says on a volunteer basis, you want to turn in any of those guns, the federal government will buy them from you. We will pay, and under my bill, we'll pay you 50% over retail. Whatever you paid for that gun, we'll pay you 50% more than that if you want to turn it in or a high capacity magazine. And then these Republicans, when I say that, they go nuts. Say, well, you're just a liberal. You're not a fiscal conservative. Listen to the rest of my plan. And then I think you'll disagree. Under my plan, we're not going to give those guns to local law enforcement because a lot of times they wind back up on the street. Under my plan, we're going to give those guns to the U.S. military because they buy guns just like that right now under federal contract for practice guns and training guns. But they're paying $1,500 a gun. So if I have to pay $750 to get one off the street, I just saved the military budget $750. So to me, that's common sense, responsible government, and it helps get some of those things off the street of people that don't really want them or use them. For the argument that they need them to hunt with, that's a bunch of crap, because I shoot feral hogs every day of the week almost, and my gun won't hold over 5 bullets. And I'm lucky if I get 3 shots off. And they say, well, if you have more bullets, you can shoot more pigs. So I've asked a whole bunch of these people that hunt feral hogs with those guns. I said, okay, how many times will you shoot? Oh, I may shoot 50 times. I said, okay, how many pigs are you killing with 50 shots? Oh, I'll kill 3 or 4. I said, okay, well, if I shoot 2 times, I kill 2 pigs. If I shoot 3 times, I kill 3 pigs. Because I don't believe in wasting that amount of money on all those shots. And I said, plus it's a safety issue. Do you know how far that bullet can travel?
Yeah.
1 mile to 1.25 miles. So every time you miss a shot, you're endangering somebody within 1 mile of where you are.
Right.
So it's your responsibility. So I can make my argument of why we don't need them.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. And then we almost spent an hour. As the end of this interview, I would like you to make your final remarks to the people in your district. I hope people in your district see this one. So you can make your request to your voters.
Well, I don't just want to talk to people in my district. I want to talk to anybody that hears this.
Okay.
You know, folks, we're in a time of something I've never seen in my entire life. In my opinion, we're on the verge of losing our democracy. And I think a lot of it boils down to strictly party politics. And in this election that we're currently in, you have a chance to either right the ship or go down with the ship. And so I ask you to not only support me, but pay attention and research the candidates that are running for the offices on your ballot and see where they stand and see how closely they align with not only your personal values, but your values as an American. And make your vote count and make your voice be heard. Now, for those of you in my district who are listening to this or anywhere else in the country, I'd love to have your support. I'm running against a guy who's done absolutely nothing except kiss rings and kiss butts and play party politics rather than work on behalf of the people of this district, this state, or this country. I'm running on term limits. I'm going to go up there and be the voice for the people of my district, whether they supported me or not. I don't have an agenda. I'm there to be their spokesperson and get things done. And after 8 years, if I decide to stay that long or I'm lucky to get elected, I'm coming home and hopefully play with grandbabies for the rest of my days until I join my wife in heaven. So hankfortexas.com is the website. Hank, the number 4 Texas is Facebook and Twitter. I'd appreciate you volunteering, contributing, whatever you think you can do. But more importantly, I just implore upon you to use your American right and get out and vote and save our country.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Thanks for a very, very sincere and then frank opinion on various topics.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Have a good day. Thank you.